Okay, so again, we've got pretty much a single page application. And I think that this is kind of a fun one in a way. And I think it sort of makes sense. You've seen this type of application many times. Um, the idea that you've got a list of users, and when you click on a letter, you end up seeing who um, the users whose last names begin with that letter. Okay, some sort of indexing to do this. Now, just to sort of talk a little bit about in terms of the structure of this, and I'm providing you with maybe a little bit less um, sort of rules here than I've done in the past, but one of the things that we're going to do here. By the way, one table. Okay, so now my feeling is at this point, I hope you're comfortable with being able to sort of connect some tables with Sequelize. You don't have to. There's one table you need for this workshop. There's no belongs to or anything like that you have to worry about. So in fact, again, I still like to have the same structure, right? And I'm renaming this because I think this was a little bit confusing. Instead of calling it DB, I'm calling it the connection because that's really your connection to the database. You have your user file. The reason why this is so long, okay, normally this would be pretty short because you see that a user has, I put a latitude, longitude, just in case if you got fancy with it and you wanted to do something with a map, but not necessary. This model has a first name, a last name, an email, and a latitude and a longitude. And I'm using a library called Faker, which will allow you to generate some fake data pretty easily, which is nice. So in fact, even on here, if I want to sort of regenerate the users, it's going to actually go up and regenerate all new users. So you could sort of play around with that. That's kind of a fun thing to have, so you could sort of get some data in there pretty quickly. So the only reason why this user class is even remotely the size that it is that there's some logic to basically take all the users, okay, and to create an index, okay? And the way that you should sort of think about that is that what's the easiest way to create an index? Well, pretty much simplistically, don't get too complicated, just find all the users, loop over each of the users, see what the first letter in their last name is, and just create a hash where the key is going to be the letter and the value is going to be the number of users that have a last name that begin with that letter. Okay? You could start off with a for each. You could eventually get to a reduce. Okay? But again, the main idea here is to get that logic really in here. Okay? Again, getting the users with a certain letter. You can see the URL if I end up clicking on a letter. I've got two routes here. And no inserting, no deleting. Okay? No inserting, no deleting, no updating. Either you're looking at all the users, or you have a path called users, filter with a letter. In which case, you know how to write you might not totally know how to write the Sequelize for that, but I'll give you a hint. Sequelize has an operator called like, and you could basically just say, hey, look, where the last name is like, whatever that letter is, and you just put a percentage sign at the end of it. And if you guys get stuck, put something in the Slack channel and ask about that. But it's going to be the like operator that you're going to be using to do that. And it's basically that and generating this, what I call it a map. But a map is just a fancy way of saying it's an object where the keys are the letters and the values are the number of users that basically have a last name that begins with the letter. So so again, I'm putting an idea of how there's going to be some class methods here. You decide what you want to name them. The thing that I want you to see here is that from a routing perspective, look how tiny this is, right? Your route.js file, and I put all my routes in here. What I wanted to do here was to sort of separate out my server and my routes, just to show you that this is going to be pretty small. okay, your routes are going to be 25 lines, two routes, slash, and then users, filter, and a letter. And just to make it kind of cool, a post route for regenerate, which will just go and regenerate all the users. So you'll see that these numbers end up changing because it's randomly generating a user with a first name and a last name. And I thought the cool part was sort of looking at this Faker library. It's kind of neat to work with. And in terms of the views, I just separated things out just slightly where I've got my index.html and my users are all this stuff and my filter is this thing over here. The nice thing about it is that you can create this application which has some real use cases. I mean, you see this sort of stuff all the time. I mean, again, you might see a much more complex filter, right? But a filter is just a way of clicking on links and selecting things where you are limiting, right, refining what your search results are. And I mean, look, I could have done something here to say, hey, look, you know what, I want to show all the letters of the alphabet and put a Y in here and a Z in here. But, hey, look, sometimes Faker gives me a Z. Let's get a Z. I have one Z here, okay? And sometimes it doesn't, okay? So the regenerate is just, again, and notice something else, right? When you do regenerate, if I didn't say it, it's a post, okay? Because you are creating data. It's destructive. You don't want to do things that are destructive with a GET request. Just a little bit too easy for someone to end up screwing things up. At least you have to create a form to end up doing it. But I think that this is a bit simpler. And I'm confident that there's no reason why everyone should not have this done. I don't care if you pair up with people. I don't care if you end up, you know, slacking with them or whatever. I think that that's fine. But I think it's really important at this point to sort of get this done. Again, it's simplistic enough. Again, starting out, first thing to do, generate some users and show the users. That's the first thing. Okay? Once you do that, think about the logic of how you're going to generate this map. Okay? And again, you might have two separate routes that have a lot of different logic, but again, most of this stuff can be simplified and can be dried out. If you don't totally get there, that's fine, but you should get the thing to work. And so I think, again, I think it's good to be able to deal with things where you don't have to go. I mean, granted, I'm having you use Faker, but if you didn't want to use Faker and you wanted to put in a users with a first name and a last name, and you got caught up on Faker and you didn't want to deal with it, that's fine. Create 4 users and do it. That's totally fine. Totally fine too. But Faker is really pretty simplistic to use.
That's on NPM.
Say it again?
That's on NPM. We'll install it.
NPM install. Right. NPM install, and you'll do require for Faker. Okay? And the other thing that I think is important too is like I like the idea to have the seed method, have it right in your, application. So again, you could have some data that's in there that you could start working with. I think it's going to make everyone's life a lot easier. All right, let me stop this recording.